Welcome back to CFO Weekly, where we're talking with financial leaders about how to build efficiency in their teams, create time for strategy, and ultimately get results. With your host, Megan Weiss. Let's jump right in.
Today, my guest is Tyler Sloat. Tyler is Chief Financial Officer at Freshworks, where he oversees accounting, finance, and IT. Tyler is a seasoned cloud finance leader and board member and has played a pivotal role in several successful IPOs and acquisitions. Previously, Tyler was CFO at Zuora, where he led the company from startup through IPO in 2018. Before Zuora, Tyler held executive finance roles at a series of technology leaders, including NetApp, Inc. and Siebel Systems. Has been a board member for several companies, including Owanda and Compass, and currently is an advisor and direct investor to a variety of private companies. He holds an MBA from Stanford and a CPA in the state of California. Tyler, thanks for being my guest today.
Megan, thank you for having me.
Yeah, today we're going to be discussing a bit about you and your career and what led you to your current position with Freshworks. Then we'll turn the conversation specifically to Freshworks, which recently underwent an exceptionally successful IPO and is just generally a great success story that should inspire millions. I'm really excited to hear your story, Tyler, as well as the Freshworks story. So let's get started.
Awesome.
First, tell me about your career progression and how it is that you got to where you are today.
I think like a lot of college students out there, I had no idea what I wanted to do in school. I was actually an econ major with pre-dental, which was the same as pre-med. But I got a job graduating and interviewed with a bunch of companies, including like sales roles and all this kind of stuff, and ended up getting a job with Coopers & Lybrand, which was, one of the big six at the time, which is now PricewaterhouseCoopers, and started in their computer assurance services group. Worked in Boston with them for an hour, but that was like IT internal controls before SOX existed. Can't say I really had a great grasp on what I was doing, but I think I did okay. And then transferred out to the San Jose office, and I transferred into the audit group. And I remember sitting in the car reading the fundamentals of accounting book because I'd never had an accounting class before. And honestly learned on the job because I got put on like 5 deals back to back, either IPOs or M&As. So I was working a ton, and I pretty quickly realized I also needed to educate myself. So I enrolled in a night class at San Jose State. And then I convinced Coopers to send me what they called Coopers Academy, which was like a 8-week intensive program at USC that gave me all the accounting credits I needed for a CPA. And worked there long enough to get a CPA in terms of experience, and then kind of just entered industry from there. And accounting is one of these things that either you kind of get it or you don't. I started as a general accounting manager and quickly got promoted to controller of a company called Poet Software. That was a private business that we ended up taking public, kind of pre-dot-com days. And that afforded me the opportunity to go back to business school, which I did, which was awesome. And from there, just kind of had this journey in Silicon Valley. And I don't know if it's luck or by grace that, I've had the opportunity to have some great roles, started at Siebel Systems, but just kind of 6 weeks into the job at Siebel, they asked me if I wanted to go run finance for this new division they were starting, which was called Siebel On Demand. And it was to compete with this little company that just started called Salesforce. And we bought 2 companies. And, I as my first foray into SaaS and figuring out everything, how those businesses were run, which was completely different than Siebel's business. And I ended up staying at Siebel probably a year and a half more than I thought I would because of that. And then went to a private hardware encryption business called The Crew, and we ended up selling that much earlier than I thought we would. I ran finance there and operations, and we sold it to NetApp about 9 months after I got there. Then given the opportunity to be the controller of the emerging products group at NetApp. And I don't know, every kind of series of events where I've chosen a company, I go through this quick analysis. I call it like, it's kind of dumb, but I call it the 5-finger analysis. I go, okay, what's the market? And what's the problem in that market is the first. And then second, what product is being brought to solve that problem? And third, what is the team that's building the product to go solve that problem? And then fourth, who are the investors backing the team to build the product to go solve that problem? And then lastly, what is the role? And I put it in that order, and I kind of just go through that. And, that's how I found Decrew. I stayed at NetApp for a couple of years, which was really fun. Then I found a company called OboPay, which had a huge market opportunity. I just think it was too early, but I was a CFO there. It was my first CFO gig. Then from OboPay, that's where I landed at Zuora. And that ended up being a almost 10-year journey, which was really fun. And I decided to leave Zuora, and that's where I found Freshworks. And that's kind of how I got here. And I've had plenty of friends who've worked at a lot of private companies in Silicon Valley and never really had an opportunity to go experience one that had incredible growth. So I consider myself blessed.
Yeah, it sounds like you've had some great adventures along the way. And I like that 5-finger method. Sounds like it's led you to some great choices.
It's pretty simple, but I think it works.
Yeah. And funny, I was actually a pre-med major too before deciding on accounting. And I couldn't pass organic chemistry.
It's an incredible way to destroy a GPA, I'll tell you that.
So as you look back on your career, are there stories or moves that stand out in your mind as turning points?
Yeah, I think I look back at those companies I was at, and I think the one that wasn't, so I've been with 5 private companies, and 3 of them now, have gone public. One of them was sold, and then the last was this company, OboPay. But OboPay was actually my first CFO job, and really drove me to really own a bunch of stuff. So I owned kind of our business development efforts there, and we didn't have any direct sales. So it was all through partnerships. I ran all the financials because I was a CFO. I also ran our treasury operations, which was the movement of all of our customers' money. And that was really exciting because we're just a little company and we're doing a ton of really big deals. But it also really educated me on the inverse perspective of how really large companies, because we had pretty big deals with Citibank, MasterCard, Societe Generale, Nokia, and how, those companies really, what they can do to a small company if that small company isn't ready. And I just had a ton of learnings through that. And also realized then that, the one thing is the market was too early, but our products they weren't built to scale. And we had such a big vision, but it didn't match the product that we were bringing to market. And I look at that and I look at the piece parts from all my other experiences. And that was the biggest learning that came back. Things like companies can get so far with marketing and vision, but the reality is it'll all catch up if you don't have the product and technology. And if you don't stay true to building products the right way and really, focusing on the customer, it's going to catch up to you. And that I think is probably my biggest learning of all the companies I've been with. And honestly, one of the reasons I ended up choosing Freshworks.
Yeah, I feel like so many companies lose sight of the customer at the end of the day.
Yeah, and at the reality, you lose sight of the customer, but maybe you do so because you're making decisions for other customers. But you lose sight of the customer, the macro customer voice, right? What do all customers need as opposed to one or two?
Yeah.
And if you design for the masses, then and you make it so that your product is easy to use for the masses, then you inevitably will just serve so many more. And then you can always just tweak and make it a little bit more flexible toward the end. But if you go down a path of designing for rigid systems, you're going to get stuck, right? We really minimize that market, that first finger that you just narrow out that market. The other place I saw this was Siebel, right? Where Siebel had, on-premise, they created an entire category called CRM. But with these big, heavy software engagements that they're living and dying by the $20, $30 million deal every quarter. And then they tried to create an on-demand product, a SaaS product, by really kind of just thinking they could take that big, heavy system, throw it in almost like an ASP model and host it for folks and get small companies to use it. And, they weren't listening to it. They weren't really paying attention at all to what customers wanted in that space. And that was a great learning as well, just exactly what not to do in that kind of environment.
Yeah, sometimes those are the best learnings. And speaking of design for the masses and easy to use, tell us about Freshworks, maybe a bit about their history, their mission, and what it is they do.
Yeah, so at Freshworks, we design products for the end user. And what that means is you're really thinking about the person, the individual who's doing their day-to-day jobs in your product. So Freshworks started as Freshdesk, which is our biggest product now. And it's, customer support software at its core, allowing our customers to engage with their customers. But building that software, and now innovating on it for over 10 years, while still staying true to the DNA of building for the end user. So what does that mean? It means the software has to have an incredible user experience, has to have a great UI, has to be really easy to navigate, and really importantly, it has to be, a really fast ROI. I mean, like it should be very easy to get started and start using. Over time, Freshworks, started with Freshdesk, then saw a bunch of customers using the Freshdesk product for internal IT purposes, and then the realization, well, they need a purpose-built product for that. And so we built Freshservice. And then, as we continue the journey, realizing that there's going to be this desire for our customers to be able to see the entire life cycle of their customer's journey with them. So we built Freshmarketer and Freshsales, and have Fresh Success as well to do this customer kind of 360 view. And so it's really products. Freshworks has products that help our customers delight their customers and have products that help our customers delight their employees. So they're kind of inverse facing. Freshservice and Freshteams help our customers, engage with their employee base. Freshsales, Freshmarketer, Freshdesk, Fresh Success help our customers engage with their customers.
Bit of a tongue twister.
That is, say it fast. Yeah, I know.
So what differentiates Freshworks from their rivals, such as Salesforce.com? And do you guys have an ideal customer?
We don't have an ideal customer. I'll answer the second part first because, we're not verticalized. We have customers, from the long tail of SMB. So, really small customers all the way up to this mid-market enterprise business. We don't go after what we call elephant hunting. If you are a very large enterprise that wants to heavily customize the software that you're buying, and really, kind of almost make it a consulting project as opposed to out of the box software, that's not for us. And we actually would walk away from those deals. We've created a product that it can be, extended with a ton of applications and kind of open APIs, but it's not built to be kind of custom built or customized incredibly. The difference between us and our competitors, and you mentioned Salesforce, is that, when Salesforce started, it probably had a very similar DNA, that it was built for small companies, supposed to be really easy to use, really easy to navigate, and they were competing with on-premise at the time. So it wasn't like a huge hurdle to make that distinction. Yet over time, I think a lot of the SaaS companies that started early have, fallen prey to the desire to go serve those mega companies and really go after those mega deals. And as such, they've had their product roadmaps hijacked. They now have these just kind of massive code bases that are just really tough to navigate, and products that are really hard to use and aren't actually self-service anymore. Whereas Freshworks has stayed true to the DNA of building for the end user, stayed true to the kind of those core concepts of great usability and UI, but really fast to onboard. And then over time, just added feature functionality that now our products are relevant to that mid-market enterprise customer base because they have the feature functionality they need, but we've also stayed true to that DNA. And that's hard to do. And, if you actually look at software companies out there today, SaaS companies included, like I would challenge anybody to name a company that started with the big enterprise and built products for them, but successfully moved down to service the long tail of SMB versus the companies who kind of have started by building products for the SMB and then just slowly moved up as their products became relevant to those larger organizations. And that's what Freshworks has done. And that's why we're different. Yeah,
I'm sure those huge enterprises can be enticing, but I guess sometimes you have to sell your soul for those opportunities.
Absolutely. And it's arguably short-sighted as well.
And what are your proudest accomplishments since joining Freshworks?
I think, your immediate thought goes to the IPO, but the IPO is just an event, right? And it's an event that was earned over a long period of time. I think my proudest accomplishment right now is the team that we've built here over the last year and a half and the individuals that we've brought on board, but also the readiness that we've instilled within the organization. And, to become a public company, you have to, you need to have operational readiness and kind of execution readiness. And operational readiness is you got to be able to, close your books on time. You have to be able to do it accurately. You have to have systems that can help scale and help the company operate. And you need to have compliance. Execution readiness is that you need to be able to do what you say you're going to do. And you have to be able to forecast your business. And you have to be able to see a little bit around corners in order to operate like a public company. And I think we have worked really, really hard for the last 2 years to get us to a point that we were comfortable in going public.
And I know we've mentioned it a few times now, but Freshworks recently underwent an IPO. And why was this so significant or historic?
There's a lot of software companies going public. We are the first SaaS company founded out of India. And to be clear, we're a US company and have been since day one, but we're really founded out in India, and our heartbeat is in Chennai. And we're the first company to really build itself with India as its core to go public in the United States. First kind of SaaS software company. And it's historic because we look at it as kind of this turning point where number one, we can be an example for so many other, software companies coming out of India. But in general, as G would like to say, his dream is to turn India into a product nation. And I think historically, India has probably been viewed as more a headcount arbitrage play through services and consulting or kind of shared services or outsourcing, where that, we are a product business and the capability to build world-class software out of India is, I think, pretty special.
Yeah, I love India. It's one of my favorite countries, and I'm sure this has inspired millions of entrepreneurs there. And I find India as a country to be so innovative. Mm-hmm. So, yep, very excited that you guys were successful in doing this. And so why the decision to go public in the US rather than maybe in India?
Yeah, I don't think there was ever even a conversation of do you go public in India versus US. I mean, we're a US company, first of all. We have, primarily US investors. But most importantly, it is, it's probably the toughest place to go public in the world. And the rigor that's required, the maturity that's required, but the validation that's provided, I don't think can be rivaled. And so for that, we kind of earned the right through the metrics that we have, through the business that's been built, and the expectations that we have in front of us I don't think it was ever a question of whether it was someplace else other than US. It was more of a question of, okay, is this the right time?
Yep. And what made this the right time?
I think it has to do more with the operational readiness and the execution readiness that I mentioned before, because there are companies who are public, SaaS companies who are public, who are smaller than us, who don't have the operational metrics that we do, meaning that we have this kind of, I'd say, this rare combination of scale, right? Being over 300 million, growth, in that kind of 40% range, but also efficiency, where we actually produced cash in the last 12 months, where there are companies that have gotten to scale and efficiency, but most of them, kind of in our peer set would probably be burning a lot of capital to do so. And we've been able to do it efficiently. And I think that is, because of that, we already had those numbers. And so I think we had already earned the right to go public based off of those metrics. The question is, were we able to operate like a public company? And that's what the work we've been doing. And, it felt like, okay, we are now ready because we've put in that infrastructure. But the metrics were already there. So that's why the timing came.
And you also led Zuora through a successful IPO. So how did this experience differ?
Yeah, for me personally, it was different because I joined Zuora when we had about, 4 million in revenue. And over time, I'd like to think I helped build the company. I managed every function at Zuora at one point or another, except for engineering. And then over time, the other thing we did was Zuora created a new category, a category that really didn't exist prior. So there's a lot of education on not just, was the category going to have a TAM that would be relevant for a company to survive as a public entity, but also would Zuora be the winner of that TAM, once that TAM presented itself. I didn't build Freshworks. I helped get Freshworks ready. I'm going to help build it going forward. But Freshworks had already been on a 10-year journey almost. And secondarily, Freshworks wasn't creating any new categories. We're just building software a little bit different in the existing categories that are already there. And so those are the two main differences for me personally, as well as kind of for the companies.
And as you look out over the next 2 to 3 years, what are your specific goals for the company?
Our goals are to keep growing. I mean, it's actually not, for us, it's not complicated. It's all about execution because, as I just mentioned, our markets are already there. And it's really, how do we have the discipline to stay true to what we've been doing for the last 10 years and the way we build our software, but then continue to execute on how we're bringing that software to market. And then once we have customers, how we engage with them. Secondarily, a lot of my job is focused on making sure the company can support that growth, both, through our own human capital, but in our infrastructure and everything else, and scale globally. And that's what we're going to be focused on for the next couple of years.
And I'm always interested to know, as a CFO, are there any tools or technologies that you or your team are using right now to help make your life easier in the workplace?
We do use all of our own Freshworks software, which I think is important. I think it's really important for software companies to either drink your own champagne or eat your own dog food, however you want to refer to it. We have, part of the readiness that we went through over the last year was putting in an entire back office stack. New financial systems, new systems that surround those financial systems. I think for CFOs today, one of the most important things is data and the integrity of data. And then kind of with integrity goes the control of that data. And then being able to get data to the businesses so that you can make decisions for the business. And so we've spent a lot of time working on operational flows and then what data is created during those flows and then capturing that data so that we have the right information to help run the business. And that's probably one of the bigger areas that we focus on right now.
Yeah, so much data out there these days, but actually making good use of it is, I guess, sometimes more difficult than just having access to it.
Exactly. Data for the sake of data doesn't help anything, right? But actually, data that helps inform decisions is really powerful.
And obviously, we're living in pretty tumultuous times right now. But as a CFO, what keeps you up at night?
I think if you ask G, it's like, when can you get back in the office? Because he's focused on culture and whatnot so much, and I am as well. But I think for us, it's just what's going to keep me up at night is continued execution and making sure that as a company, we're placing the right bets. And it's my job to help the company, make decisions and to help the management team make decisions. And that's just you wake up every day and you try to make a little bit more progress on continuing to build the next great software company.
And lastly, if our listeners take just one thing away from this episode, what would you like it to be?
One thing first is just that for any technology company, the thesis is that it always comes down to the product and the technology and the rigor that you have in building. But two, that the way we operate as organizations today, that, companies are truly global. And if you look at what Freshworks has been able to do, founded out of India, with the majority of our employee base in India, but to be able to, really reach the success and scale that we have, but also doing it truly on a global basis, I think it is a somewhat of a wake-up call that the traditional method of founding your company in Silicon Valley, hiring all your engineering here, starting your sales in North America, and then slowly moving to Europe and moving on, you don't have to do that. In fact, there's much more efficient ways to do it a little bit differently. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that going forward. So I think it's a pretty exciting time.
Yeah, I love that. And such an amazing story. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being my guest today, Tyler.
Absolutely, Megan. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I really enjoyed speaking with you, and I appreciate you taking the time to be here with us today. It sounds like you and Freshworks are doing exceptionally well, and I wish you both continued success. And to all of our listeners, please tune in next week. And until then, take care.
If you're ready to boost efficiency and streamline your accounting processes at significant cost savings, it's time to talk with Personiv. Their people-powered solutions have transformed the delivery of back-office tasks and general accounting functions for decades, partnering with clients to provide everything from accounts payable to payroll services. See what Personiv can do for you by visiting personiv.com.
You've been listening to CFO Weekly, presented by Personiv. Please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts to hear all of our episodes. Want to learn more? Check out personiv.com. Thanks for listening.